Hey there investors, welcome back to another video. Today we'll be looking at Intel. The ticker symbol for Intel is INTC, and the reason we'll be looking at Intel is because of unusual option activity. Remember, we look at unusual option activity because we want to follow the smart money, and the smart money is made up of these large, sophisticated institutional investors with buying power in the millions. These are investors who are either buying very large volumes of calls thinking a stock's going to go up, or buying large volumes of puts thinking that a stock will go down. This is what we define as unusual option activity. And the great thing about options is that they give us a time frame, which is the expiration date on the contracts, and they give us a strike price, which is where investors think the stock price is going to move. As investors, we can try to take advantage of all that information by following their trades or taking a more conservative position so that we can make a return on our investment. Remember investors, these videos are for entertainment purposes only. Please check out the disclaimer in the description below, as well as other information that I'll be covering in this video. So with that, let's dive right in. You can see that Intel as a company and its stock has been falling lately, and that's mainly due because of its loss of market share with its other competitors, other chip makers in the semiconductor industry, such as AMD and NVIDIA, and there's been strong competition from them. And they've also lost a few customers here and there via Apple on a few of their ARM processes or products that they provided in the past. And a lot of other customers are beginning to outsource the production of their own products that they used to previously obtain from Intel. So you can see that the stock reflects that decrease in the value that has been lost, and it's been kind of consolidating for a little bit here. And so we want to kind of take a look at what unusual option activity is telling us so that we can get some feel for what the investor sentiment is around the stock, because there has been some movement lately going back up. So when we look at unusual option activity, we see that Intel, as of today, was one of the most actively traded stock options in the market. Along with Intel was Apple, Alibaba, NIO, Amazon, Tesla. And Apple and Tesla usually see around there, but some of these other names are beginning to peak back up. But Intel was one that stood out in particular. So you can see in the chain here on Market Chameleon that 75% of investors think that the price of Intel is going to go up via calls, and 25% are bearish via puts. You can see the volume here is pretty good, and our relative volume ratio, which is indicative of unusual option activity, is greater than 1, which is a good sign. So the greater the ratio, the more an indication of unusual option activity. So with that said, what is driving this sentiment in investors? And to answer that, we really want to look at what's going on in the news. So when we look at what's going on with Intel, we can see that today there's some big news that broke out, and I guess you can kind of assess it as big or not based on certain criteria. However, the news somewhat made headlines in the fact that a big hedge fund that is a owner of Intel has been recommending the company to try to do something about its current problems with it facing lower customer demand and more competition from its competitors. So you can see here Intel stock surges as activist investor Daniel Loeb pushes it to explore deals. So when we take a look here, you can see that Loeb, who recently pushed for Walt Disney to focus more on its streaming platform and permanently suspend its dividend, is urging Intel to hire an investment advisor to help the chip maker determine if it should remain an integrated device manufacturer and if it should divest some of its recent acquisitions. So you can see here that Loeb has actually quite a pretty good reputation being involved with helping Disney, get its streaming service up and going, which we all have seen how successful that's been. And we can see too in Disney as well, the stock has been rewarded pretty tremendously for that success in its streaming service. Another thing to note here is that Loeb's hedge fund has nearly 1 billion stake in the $200 billion company, right? So he clearly has some interest in the company and wants his investment to succeed. So that is mainly what is driving this current market sentiment and this rally in Intel, is that they want Intel to turn the ship around and to get back going and competing against its competitors, but also getting some customers. So you can see there some of the news. Rivals AMD, NVIDIA, and other semiconductor manufacturers. But another thing to note is that Intel did respond to Loeb's comments and said it welcomes input from all investors regarding enhanced shareholder value. So the company itself is looking to make a transition and do a quick turnaround. So that's good news, and that's we can see is what is driving some of the action today. And here's another chart that I wanted to point out, is that relative to AMD or Advanced Micro, we can see that Intel stock hasn't been performing as well as AMD captures more of the market that Intel used to have. So we can see that is somewhat negative, but also positive for investors in Intel, because that means that Intel has been kind of the sleeping giant. And if they are able to turn things around, they'll be able to recapture back some of this market share, and in doing so would be able to increase the value of their stock or company valuation. So, now that we have a good grasp of what's going on and what's driving this market sentiment around Intel, let's take a look at what positions investors specifically are taking based on the unusual option activity. And to that, we'll look at our option chain. So down here in the middle, we have our strike price, or the price that investors think the stock is going to go. Over here on the left, we have our expiration dates. And to the right within this side, we have the volume of how much of these contracts have been traded within these ranges of expirations. And right off the bat, we can see that December 31st obviously stands out because of the news breaking out lately and more recently today. But also you see a very interesting thing that there's large volume in January 15th, and which is kind of odd because you would expect that sort of the hype around this turnaround would die off. But looking into this January 15th, we see that investors are placing a pretty big bet around the $50 strike price range for this stock. So you can see a volume of 41,942 contracts have been traded so far. So that is a good sign that investors are still pretty bullish on the stock, not only in the short term because of the news, but in the long term. And that could mean because of its potential to recapture some of its market share. So with that being said, let's take a look at how likely it really is for Intel to achieve this stock price of $50 if this is what investors are thinking. And to answer that, we'll want to take a look at some technical analysis of the stock to try to understand some previous patterns and previous price history and movement to see where the stock is going, and to understand if the stock could hit the prices that investors think it will. So to do that, we can see, and I've drawn some lines out here, the stock came back down during its recent lows and declines because of the loss of its market share, and sort of kind of bounced off of this line of support here. You can see as well in the past, this line has served as not only a line of support but of resistance when it's tried to made its way back up here, and the stock pushed back, came back down, and kind of consolidated around that line. And when it finally broke out, we can see the upside there. And similarly, we see that another level of resistance and support is forming around this line. The level of support was established roughly around this time frame, and you can see the volume there increasing around there, a good indication that that is a strong level of support, but a level that was able to be broken through large volume and then kind of went back down. We can see here that it also served as a level of support. And apologies, I might have confused it. Over here it served as a level of resistance, but here we see it served as a level of support. And then it came back up a little bit and went back down. So there's good potential that on the upside, based on this news and the momentum going forward, that the stock could break this level of support and we could potentially see more highs up in the 50 range. And to take a better look at that, we see that in the past we see the level of support here and resistance here, but we also see levels of resistance here in its previous price action and more levels of support here. So the stock was able to come back down to that level, but then didn't exactly break it and then came back up. So that's a good indication right there, and I am really liking where that level is falling. Similarly over here we see that when the stock broke through that level, it came back down, but then established somewhat of a support down in the lower lows here, and then after that rebounded after consolidating within this range and came back up to the highs. So that is a very positive sign. So with that being said, we can see that the trade ideal, or the ideal trade for this price action, would be to try to capitalize on some of the upside that investors are seeing. However, things could turn around because of sentiment in the market. The market could turn bearish or it could turn bullish. As we've seen lately, there's been a lot of selling in the market, and really what that's been attributed to based on news and trends is that a lot of hedge funds and institutional investors who have clients on their portfolios have been selling some of their positions, which have been performing very well through a lot of the highs we've seen in the market, specifically in the NASDAQ and S&P. And they are selling their positions because they want to prove to their clients who invest within their portfolios that they are generating healthy returns for them. So that is some of the selling that is going on, and that's typically what is attributed to around this end of the year time frame, where investors want to make their hedge funds and portfolio management look awesome, right? So they want to be able to scrub their returns so that it looks good, that they made a lot of money at the end of the year. So it's a last minute kind of rush to show returns in their investments that they've been making throughout the year. So you can see a lot of that selling has been happening because of that in some of the stocks, especially some of the hotter stocks that have been recently trending, such as NEO and all of those stocks, the hot IPO stocks. So, you know, with that, any trend that happens or news that breaks out could turn the market bullish or bearish. So you definitely want to practice active portfolio management and do that, you know, pretty frequently so you can monitor positions. And if the stock, if the market does turn bearish, or if conditions for the stock specifically turn bearish, you always want to be prepared for that and take a risk mitigating strategy on the downside to protect yourself in case of a false breakout or anything like that. And we could see that happen typically around levels of support and resistance. However, with news like this, usually the momentum is pretty strong and would carry us upwards. And since the stock has been somewhat consolidating around these levels, we can see that it's ready to be breaking out, which is synonymous to what's been going on with some of the action in Alibaba. You can see that stock has been getting hit lately because of some of the news, but is now looking to climb back up as a lot of really bullish investors are seeing it as a overreaction to some of the news. And so this may be a case where a lot of the market share loss could be an overreaction. Investors are regaining confidence in Intel potentially making a turnaround. So with that being said, guys, sorry for the long rant there, but you can see that the trade here would be getting the January 15th expiration and really following the smart money there to the dot on the 50 calls, getting them right now for $1.14, which is pretty cheap. And we would want to get in for entry point purposes around the 20-day simple moving average, which you can see is this yellowish line here. And as I mentioned before in previous videos, when the yellow line crosses the higher moving average, which is in this case the 50-day moving average, that is usually a good indication of a strong buying signal. As well, we can see large volume of buying here, which is solidifying that support line there, which is a good indicator, and strong momentum going into today with large buying volume again. So really strong indicators here. Again, the stock could do a turnaround and come back off of this level of resistance here if conditions turn bearish. So again, practice portfolio management and being actively involved as much as you can. Doesn't mean you have to be monitoring every day, but definitely keep an eye out for conditions. So our entry point really we want to be with the stock trending above this moving average, which you can see is going to be this line here when I remove my mouse is around 49.32. So this line tips right around there, 49.30. So above that trend, that's where we want to be, because that'll give us good indication that the momentum of the market and the price action is in our favor. So if we trade above that, our next levels to take profits and close our positions would be these as follows, which again are based on levels where the stock has been previously before, and I have that here within our cheat sheet. So you can see the high that it reached before, 50.67, and then previous levels of resistance. So those right there are going to be our levels that we want to reach. At the third level specifically, you could take either one of these two based on some of the candles that we see here in previous action and some of the indicators here. So again, if conditions turn bearish, we could see this trade simply turning back around, and if that happens, we want to close our positions with the stock coming back down to the simple moving average line of 49.32, because if it's going below that line and trading below that, that's a good indicator that the momentum is no longer in our favor. So we need to cut our losses if we have any and close the position and turn around with the market, follow the market, and don't try to fight the trend. It's usually hard when there's a lot of selling, and a lot of that happens when the trend is broken. So if that were to happen, we'd simply hop on, switch our position to the put side to mitigate that risk on the downside, and that entry point would be anywhere below that simple moving average 49.32, solid indicator there. And then our support levels would be as follows. So those again are based on previous levels that have been hit before. First one being the 48.85, which we could see has been reached in the past here around the pivot point, and then your other levels of support that follow. So there you go, guys. And this level is also pretty important with the 40-day moving average, which we can see comes pretty close to its 50-day moving average. So that level in particular, if the stock is able to get down to that level and break past that level in a bearish market, it's a good indicator that it could continue to go down because it's breaking a long moving average trend of the 50-day. So with that being said, our stop loss for a put position would be with the stock coming back up above that moving average, which is again an indication that momentum is no longer in our favor. And again, we want to look at the position that the smart money is taking, and when we do that, we see that with expiration of January 15th and volume open interest of 88,000, we can see that there's roughly $10 million being traded here. So big money moving these contracts. And a lot has already been traded in the earlier expirations, but very interesting to see that there's still a lot of investor interest within the long term, medium to long term by January. So that is it, investors. Let me know what you think about this idea. Let me know any thoughts you have on Intel specifically. Please remember to like and subscribe and stay tuned for more videos. Thanks again for watching.